My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me now and we will explore these topics and so much more with fascinating guests, authors, and experts who will guide us to Destination Unlimited. Astrophysicist, author, and host of Cosmos, and skeptic Carl Sagan once asked the Dali Lama what he would do if reincarnation was disproved by science. The Dali Lama, with his great wisdom and equally great sense of humor, responded, "If science can disprove reincarnation, Tibetan Buddhism would abandon reincarnation. But it's going to be mighty hard to disprove reincarnation. What if we do come back, lifetime after lifetime? Would we learn from each existence and bring that wisdom back with us? Would it make us more loving, compassionate, and better stewards of this world that we've been entrusted with?" My guest this week on Destination Unlimited, Dena Merriam, experienced events in her life that awakened memories of previous lifetimes. Dena is a managing partner at Finn Partners and a partner and vice chairman of Finn. Her areas of responsibility include their work in cultural marketing, creative services, corporate responsibility, and in work for religious and nonprofit organizations. In the area of creative services, she oversees the publishing, editorial, design, visual technology, and new media divisions of Finn. She also manages their arts and communications counselors division, which develops cultural programs for corporations and governments and provides strategic counsel to museums, foundations, and other cultural institutions. In support of the objectives and goals of the United Nations, Dena serves with the Interfaith Center of New York City and the creation of the Millennium Peace Summit for religious and spiritual leaders. Their objective is to engage religious leaders from around the world to work as a resource to the UN in its efforts to resolve conflict throughout the world. She also provides counsel to the State of the World Forum in its attempt to gather world thought leaders together to address international problems. Dena has been working in the interfaith movement since the late 1990s, when she served as vice chair of the Millennial World Peace Summit of Religions and Spiritual Leaders held at the United Nations in New York. She subsequently convened a meeting of women religious and spiritual leaders in Geneva, and from that gathering founded the Global Peace Initiative of Women in 2002. It's an organization chaired by a multi-faith group of women spiritual leaders. The mission of the organization is to enable women to facilitate healing and reconciliation in areas of conflict and post-conflict, and to bring spiritual resources to help address critical global problems. In 2014, she received the Millennium Peace Prize for her interfaith peace efforts. She joins me this week to discuss her book, My Journey Through Time, a spiritual memoir of life, death, and rebirth. Please welcome to Destination Unlimited, Dena Merriam. Good evening, Dena.
Good evening. Wonderful to be here.
Wonderful to have you with us. So when we welcome guests to Destination Unlimited for the first time, we ask them to share their early life with us and how it formed the path that they followed. Please tell us about the foundation of your path.
I was born into a secular Jewish family, but had a spiritual interest since a young child. I used to pray at night, whatever prayers that I knew, and picked up along the way. And I early on developed an inner life that I couldn't share with anybody because my family was very focused, very involved with the arts, and didn't have any spiritual interest or inclination. So I developed this interior life and began my teen years doing a lot of reading into different spiritual traditions, and was very fortunate that I found my guru's book when I was 20, Autobiography of a Yogi by Yogananda. As soon as I saw his picture on the book, I recognized him. And the immediate response was surprising to me. I just immediately knew that he was my teacher, and that this was not the first time I was coming in contact. He had left his body, and so I didn't have a personal meeting with him in this life, but I felt as if I knew him and that he was my dearest friend. And so I began meditating after that. I began reading his teachings and connecting with his organization and studying his techniques of meditation.
And when did you start a meditation practice? How old were you?
20.
And this was, what decade was this?
Oh my goodness, 70s. It was the 70s.
So this was really before meditation had become something that was in the common parlance and that people of all groups started doing.
Very much so. As a matter of fact, I had to hide it from my family. When they found out I was meditating, they were afraid I was going to jump out of a window or be hypnotized. They thought it was very cultish. And meditation at that time was not mainstream. People in the West didn't understand what it was, and they thought you'd go into some bizarre state and do crazy things.
Absolutely. How did the teachings of Yogananda change your life?
They dramatically changed my life. It's hard in a few sentences to say how, but Yogananda points you to your own inner resources. He gives you the tools with which you can awaken your own inner spiritual awareness. And so I took very seriously his teaching of developing a very persistent and serious meditation practice every day, an hour here, morning and night. I took it very seriously and did the best I could to develop a steady practice.
And did this, I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
And this began to unlock experiences for me. Once you go inside, you begin to see you're not just sitting in the darkness with closed eyes. Things are happening. You're awakening things. The mind is endless. The mind is just, we use just a very tiny portion of our resources, our capabilities. Once that's unlocked, all kinds of things begin to happen.
Now, did this also include a yoga practice?
Hatha yoga?
Yes.
I did hatha yoga, but the focus was always on meditation.
Mm. And how did you find getting into meditation? What was that experience like for you?
Well, it was difficult as a young woman because the mind is restless. And so I remember meeting somebody who said that he was doing 2 hours a day, and I thought, oh my God, he must be enlightened. For me to meditate a half an hour was a big deal. Of course, now I long for long periods of meditation where you can really go into the stillness. But it takes a long time to really develop the depth of meditation. So you're just not sitting there with your mind going here and there, that you're really stilling your mind so that you can tap something much deeper. But it was after I started this meditation practice, I also was studying a lot of the sacred texts from all religions, but my real interest was in Hinduism, in reading the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita. So the philosophy was coming along. I wasn't just on my own. I was understanding a whole world view, a whole grasp of what this life was. We're born and then we disappear. Well, what is it? Where do we come from? Where do we go to? I mean, there was a whole spectrum of questions that I had, and so and these are things that were with me from early life. I wanted to know. I wanted to understand. It wasn't enough to accept that one day you die and that's the end of it. I wanted to know what happened.
Absolutely. And these are questions that I think all of us ask at some point, even those of us who don't have an experience with Eastern philosophy. When did you have your first sense of a past life experience? And what was that like for you?
Well, I had glimpses when I've been meditating about 10 years when I was about 30. And I had glimpses, just intuitions and instincts. But it wasn't until I was about 40 that I began to really see a whole narrative unfold. And that was, so when I was about 30, I moved into my house. The house awakened memories for me. And I began to dream of another house. And these dreams continued for 10 years. I would dream about the house. I'd wake up. I'd be disoriented. I would say, oh, I was there again. And why am I feeling such longing? And what are these feelings it's evoking? And then months would go by and I'd dream about the house again. And so this persisted for a number of years. And then in my work life, somebody entered my work sphere and he began talking to me in Russian, calling me a Russian name. And I felt an attraction to him. I was divorced, he was divorced, and I didn't know what it was. And then it was at that time that the memories began to recur. First began with a vision where I saw myself as a young child in Russia. And then I began to see things. I'd sit in meditation. I'd be back in time. I'd be seeing a whole scene like I was in a movie, only identified with the character. I knew that I was that character. So it was like watching a movie of myself back in time.
And did this gentleman that you meet, did he live in that time? Did you meet him in that previous lifetime?
Yes, he was somebody who had been important to me toward the end of my life. And it's interesting because he came in as a colleague at work, and I was working closely with him. And when the memories, as soon as the narrative was over and I had seen the whole life, he left, and I didn't see him again for, every now and then I run into him. But basically the job was done. He'd come into my life for a certain purpose. And, when you see a past birth, which is not something to take lightly, because it awakens emotions. It can be confusing. It can be distracting. There is a good reason why we don't remember. It's not easy, in your current life, you have to deal with all kinds of upheavals, emotional things, relationships, dealing with your family. And, imagine if you're dealing with that, plus you have to deal with those things from your past birth. All of the emotional baggage that you left behind comes back to you. And so it can be a bit challenging.
Absolutely. My guest is Dena Merriam. She's the author of My Journey Through Time, a spiritual memoir of life, death, and rebirth. And we'll be back with more after these words on the OMTimes radio.
OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
180 over 111, and I had a stroke. I couldn't speak or walk.
This is high blood pressure. Get back on your plan. Go to loweryourhbp.org. Brought to you by the American Stroke Association, American Medical Association, and the Ad Council.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this evening is Dena Merriam. She's the author of My Journey Through Time, a spiritual memoir of life, death, and rebirth. So in the first segment, we were talking about your first memory of being a child in Russia, growing up in Russia, sort of steered on a little bit by the meeting of this gentleman who called you by a Russian name and who you recognized as having been in your life in that time. Did this surprise you, or did it resonate with you?
Oh, at first, it surprised me greatly. And then when I sat with it and I really looked at it, it made total sense. It surprised me because I thought, oh, surely my last life must have been in India. I love India. I'm so, I must have been a yogi somewhere. And then when I saw myself born into an aristocratic family in Russia, it was like, what? And then when I remembered my obsession when I was a child with Russian ballet, how I would close the door and just dance even though I wasn't really trained. And this, of course, came from my past birth where I was an aspiring dancer. And then when I remembered in my teenage years how I was so drawn to Russian literature, read everything, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky. I was very drawn to Russian culture as a young person. So, and I've seen with my own children that if you look at their early life, there's so many clues to the past, so many clues to the past. And then, of course, they get busy with what their current mission is. And so it made sense to me. And this has happened every time I've gone back. I've been able to trace back, 7 or 8 lives. They've all been surprises to me. And I initially said, what was I doing there? And then as I looked closer, I saw remnants from those lives in my current life.
What type of research did you do to look into those experiences?
Well, I went as far as to take a trip. I remembered a scene at the end of my life when I was in Europe, and I saw the Nazis march into the city where I was living in Prague, and I remembered very distinctly standing by the window, looking to the right, and they were marching down that boulevard. And I went and I found that boulevard. I found that scene that I had seen. And then I checked out other things that I had, this university that I had heard, that I had seen in my memories, and I had never heard of it before. Of course, it turned out to be a very prominent university. So when I would see things, I would go back and find out if those things existed. And sometimes I would just be shocked, So how did I know that? I went to the place where I remembered my childhood in St. Petersburg, Russia. Walked the streets, found the ballet school. The first memory of my last birth, I actually went to these places to see if they matched what I was seeing, and they did. And then gradually, I learned to trust what I was seeing. Because, after a point, it wasn't the details that were important. The important thing to me was, what was it teaching me? How is it changing me? What am I learning from this? Is this useful?
Were these experiences where you'd come to these places from your last life, or your past life, rather, were they visceral for you? Did you feel, I've been here, I know this place, more than intellectual, but also visceral?
Yes.
What did it feel? What did it feel like?
It felt, well, when I went back to St. Petersburg, there's a whole story in the book about how I was sent out during the revolution at 14 and never saw my parents again. So it awakened sadness in me. It awakened sadness. And then I went there in the 90s. It was just after the Soviet Union fell. It was very drab. And I thought, this is not the St. Petersburg I remember. I remember it being so glittery and lush in terms of wealth. And it was very drab, and so I saw what was, what Russia had been and what it had become through the Soviet era, and so it awakened a sadness in me.
Your book is so wonderful, My Journey Through Time, detailing these different lifetimes and areas of the world and experiences. Without giving away a lot, please share with our listeners a little bit about some of your other lifetimes.
Well, I remembered the lifetime before being born in Russia. I was born in the Deep South in the early part of the 19th century. And again, that surprised me. I couldn't believe it. And then as I saw the whole narrative, I realized that one of the themes that emerged again and again for me is empowering women. And so in that life, I founded a school for girls and came up north and really was very drawn to move to the north. And I didn't have the chance to. I died. But I got involved in the intellectual life of the north with the poets and Emerson, and that was very stimulating. It was there that I came in contact with the teachings of the East. Emerson had, the poet Emerson, had written a poem, Brahma, and where he talked about the philosophy of the East, and he was very influenced by that. And so, interestingly, it was in that life in the South that I again came in contact with teachings from the East. And then before that life, I wondered, why was I born into a plantation in the South? And I saw that the life before that I had been in Africa. And it was during the slave trade. And there was a raid on my village, and my son was taken as a slave. And that was a heartbreak for me. I was killed. And so I followed him to America. So what I began to see were patterns, themes that were emerging for me but also patterns that took me from one place to another. And it's a continuing, it's like different chapters in an ongoing story. I see them not as different lives, but as one life where you're growing and learning and taking on new experiences, building on what you've learned, and you take it to the next chapter. And so at a certain point, my attention shifted from the past to the future. And I realized that if the past shaped my present situation, my circumstances today, then my present situation is going to shape my future. Absolutely. We all have a future.
Absolutely.
And so this whole law of cause and effect was really what intrigued me.
Now, how did you determine, you mentioned going to St. Petersburg and seeing and going to Prague and seeing these places that you had remembered. How did you determine that all of these past life experiences that you share in My Journey Through Time are actually real and not something that your imagination sort of manifested?
Well, this is something that it certainly did occur to me. When I was having the first experiences, I was a single mom raising 2 teenage sons, holding a job, and I said to myself, I'm a creative person, but I'm not that creative to create these whole stories. And mostly it was what I learned from them. And so to me, it was such a learning experience to see my past. It helped me more than lifetimes of psychotherapy, actually, because I understood where certain things about myself, where it came from. I saw things about myself. I saw the causes of my things that I was interested in, my work, my mission in life, what drove me, what my aspirations are for the future. I understood all these things much better. And so to me, it didn't even matter, real or not real. Who can we say? Well, how can we say? How can I prove it, All I can say is that these experiences were very, very beneficial and helpful to me and gave me a much deeper understanding of how the law of cause and effect works.
Now, you talk about cause and effect, and in the Hindu tradition, we call it karma. What have your experiences taught you about karma?
Well, karma, everything yields a reaction. Every act, every thought yields an outcome. And so but it's most often not in an immediate response. And most often it will take place at some point in the future. And then we're in the future and we don't understand where did this come from. But nothing is arbitrary. Nothing is imposed on us. There's no judge saying you're going to be punished for what you did. It's all self-determined. We create our future. We created our current situation. Not maybe consciously, but subconsciously, the soul guides us from one life to the next to help learn certain lessons. And we choose the lessons that we want to. We choose the parents, the situation we want to be born into. All of this is at a soul level. And once we realize this, that we are the shapers of our own destiny, and we have guides, we have helpers along the way, but we have to take responsibility for our current situation, and then we have to take responsibility for shaping the future that we want. The law of cause and effect is like the law of gravity. It's a universal law. It works. You can't get around it. I mean, there are things you can do to mitigate certain karma. If you can try to mitigate the results. And, through blessings of teachers and all that. But basically, once you set something in motion, you reap the results from what you've set in motion.
And how can we learn from these experiences to reset the law of cause and effect?
I think we can learn to be more mindful of our thoughts and our actions, to know that we're going to set something in motion. For me, the way I've done is I've the relationships that have been a little bit difficult that I would have just not put any energy into, I've put energy into trying to resolve them or at least neutralize any kind of negative feeling I would have so that I don't carry that into the future. That's been a very conscious thing that I've done because I know that relationships, you meet up again and again if there's anything that's unfinished, good and bad. I mean, there could be a positive karma where you meet up again, but there could also be something unresolved. And so that's been one of the things that I've tried to pay attention to. Also paying attention to what my calling is in this life. What can I achieve so that the next life I'll be able to take it a step further.
It's interesting to me that a lot of what you're sharing is stuff that I've personally experienced in the second half of my life, from the age of like 38 on, and that a lot of these lessons were learned in my 50s also.
I think your perspective changes. That's how I feel. So at the beginning of your life, you're really you're just working off a lot of the stuff that you've brought with you, and then there comes a point where a lot of that stuff has been resolved, and now you're looking toward the future a little bit.
Absolutely. My guest is Dena Merriam. She's the author of My Journey Through Time, a spiritual memoir of life, death, and rebirth. Dena, please tell our listeners where they can get your book and find out more about your work.
They can get the book on Amazon. Just type in my name, Dena Merriam, or My Journey Through Time. And you can find out, I have a website and there's a Facebook page. The website is Global Peace Initiative of Women. That's gpiw.org. And the Facebook page is under my name, also under the Global Peace Initiative of Women.
And we'll be back with Dena Merriam on the OMTimes Radio Network.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM Radio Network.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Have you bought into the idea that you have to work hard for your money, that business is hard? I will share some dynamic access consciousness tools to get you out of your own way so you can create a business that actually succeeds. Join me, Simone Millisers, on The Joy of Business at 4 p.m. Mondays Eastern.
Some knowledge belongs to us and us alone. The way our girlfriends walk, talk, touch their hair. Details that only a sister can know about her girls. But what about our other girls? The ones we carry with us every day. Our bond with our sister girls gives life. But knowing your breasts can save it. Go to knowyourgirls.org for the facts you need on breast health. Brought to you by Susan G. Komen and the Ad Council.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this evening is Dena Merriam. She's the author of My Journey Through Time, a spiritual memoir of life, death, and rebirth. Let's talk a little bit more about some of these experiences that you had in recalling these past lives. Are there patterns and consistencies? You sort of alluded to this earlier. What are some of the patterns and consistencies in these lives, and how do they come to fore today for you?
Well, I saw, going back several hundred years, I would find myself in a situation where I had to be a bridge of different cultures, and either through marriage or just through my family situation. And so, I never in this life had the intention of working in the interfaith world. It was something I sort of backed into. I was a quiet yogi, raising my kids, doing my meditation, not really thinking about getting involved professionally in the spiritual world at all. But a situation arose and I was kind of pushed into it in the late 1990s. And when I looked back, I saw that this is the culmination of many, many past efforts. In India, during the Mughal invasions, I was a Hindu married into a Muslim family and had to deal, and that was a major theme of that life. I remembered a life in Japan where I was married into an opposing clan, and making peace among the clans through the arts was a major theme of that life. And so I saw that this was not the first time I was doing this work. And so I because I often asked, why am I doing this work? And so it really helped me kind of understand that this was the culmination of many lifetimes. And then it was just exactly where I was supposed to be. And the other theme, as I mentioned earlier, was coming into my own as a woman in spiritual life. And I had this was the theme that came up again and again for me in the past, of women's ability to experience, to achieve the same heights as men spiritually. Many traditions, there's been the patriarchal repression of women in religious life. And so that was a struggle for me in different cultures. And again, so it's interesting that I was able to create this platform for women spiritual leaders. That's how the work started. Of course, it expanded now, and it's equally men and women. But the initial impulse for this Global Peace Initiative that I founded was to highlight the role of women spiritual teachers.
Were you always a woman in all of your past lives?
No, but the ones that I recount in the book, yes, because they're the ones I have the complete narrative of. There are other glimpses that I've had where I've been a man here and there. But for the past series, 6 or 7, I've been a woman.
I'm just wondering if it would have been more benefit. Well, it would have been if there would have been benefit for people who are men or masculine in this lifetime to have been women in previous lifetimes, especially those who aspire to government and politics.
Yeah, sure, if you go back further enough, the thing that I realized that astounded me is the diversity, the breadth. And if you identify with all, if you see that you've been everywhere and you've been everything, it's hard to hold any prejudices. And yeah, I think if a man could remember being a woman, they could access that part of themselves more easily. We shut down so much when you're born into a particular situation. You just identify with that situation. But a teaching that really came to me through this was my whole identity shifted. Who am I? At the end of the book, I kind of come to that conclusion. I'm all of them and I'm none of them. And this personality, when you die, there'll be a few highlights you take with you. What are you going to remember? So I started thinking about that. What am I going to take with me? What are my memories of this life going to be?
Have any of your past life recollections been disturbing?
Yes.
Willing to share one or two?
Well, I could share 2. At the end of my life, I was a refugee in Europe, having been sent out of Russia during the revolution, and then get caught in Europe during the Nazi time. And there was a man in my life who was very important to me. He was a Jewish professor at this university in Germany, and the Jewish professors were disappearing. And he was helping them get out, and then one day he disappeared. And so that I remember that vividly. I remember Nazi Germany vividly. And I remembered at my deathbed when the light comes and Yogananda's there to take me on, because I did meet Yogananda in that life. On the one time that he was returning to India through Germany, I was able to see him. But I saw what was happening to the Jews in the concentration camps. And then I heard a voice, you can help from there as well. And so when I remembered my death, and I remembered that was very traumatic. And then I remembered the raid on my village in Africa when the slave traders came and captured my son, and that was very painful. That took me a long time to get over.
Absolutely. And what about the memories, the past lives that have brought you great joy?
Oh, there have been, the beautiful thing when I looked back was that in every life there had been a teacher, there had been somebody, and I think we could all say that. There's some guardian angel who appears at an important moment. And I had one life which was the poorest. We were dirt poor. It was in Persia, and I was the only daughter of a Sufi father, the only child, I should say. My mother had died. It was the 2 of us. And he was a great being, and it was just the 2 of us, and we had such joy together, such joy. And to me, the joyful moments, the highlights have been these encounters with these great beings in every life. In Japan, there was a sensei who brought me so much peace. In India, I had 2 lives in India that I remember. There was a sadhu who came and rescued me at an important moment. And these relationships have not gone away. I continue to feel connected to them. And in Africa, I had a woman shaman teacher who lived in the jungle. And she is still a presence with me. I still feel her love across centuries. And to me, that is one of the great lessons of this. And these are the reasons I decided to share my stories, which, took a bit of courage, because love you carry with you from lifetime to lifetime. And these relationships are really what it's about and really what lasts. And so that's very comforting to know that the relationships don't dissipate or go away.
Absolutely. And these memories, these lifetimes have shaped your life path and turned you into the person that you are today.
Yes, very much so.
And how does it affect the work that you've done, the work for peace and the Global Women's Initiative? Tell us about that.
Well, it's, as I said, a continuation. It began with trying to create a platform for women, but now it's more about awakening the feminine energy, awakening the Shakti, the divine, the work of the divine feminine, and a lot of our work has now been focused on climate change and the environment. How do we reawaken our love for the earth, which is absolutely necessary if we're going to survive. So I see that I've carried it all to another stage, which is now seeing the critical point that humanity is at. What are the things we need to do to shift consciousness? And so I feel that the lifetimes previous had prepared me, have given me a foundation from which I can help with this work, which is about seeing the news, seeing what's arising, because something is emerging that's going to be different and much better from the way things are now. The structure, our institutions are no longer working, political, financial, social, and so something new has to emerge. And that's going to take creative energy from all of us collectively. And so I often draw upon the teachings from the past, and I draw upon my guides and teachers who have helped me in the past to come help me now, be of service.
In your book, you also talk about the future. What have your experiences taught you about the future that's before us?
Well, I think that we're at a transition time, and it's not clear yet what it's going to look like. What transition to what? We have to find a way of living more sustainably on the earth. We have to find a way of awakening the love again and respect for the earth. And that means it all, the rivers, the forests. We're so far from that. I mean, we're destroying everything. The oceans. I mean, every day there's more data that comes out. How do we turn this huge ship around? I think the role of the feminine is very important in that. The role of the Shakti is very important in that. And so I see that has been the work that my past has brought me to. I think also the intercultural work of doing it together as one humanity, instead of allowing this polarization, which is so dangerous. We're instead of falling susceptible to this division. We're emerging from a world of separation and division into one of unity, human unity, and unity with the earth. And we have to continually work at that unity if we're going to pass through this period of transition successfully.
And how much of this change is and will be dependent on people finding love and compassion within themselves, for themselves?
Oh, I think totally. That's the starting point. I mean, first you have to awaken a love in yourself and compassion for yourself, and a sense of self-respect before you can give it to anyone else. And that's a sad thing now that so many people are struggling with that here in America.
And ultimately go to the foundation, the basic tenet of every faith and religion that's ever existed in this world, and that's do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Yeah.
The golden rule for everyone.
And that's the law of cause and effect, too.
That's it. That's the secret. My guest this evening, Dena Merriam. She's the author of My Journey Through Time, a spiritual memoir of life, death, and rebirth. And we'll be back with more after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
Change and growth are part of natural life, and also part of your spiritual life. Everyone needs support and guidance, especially during life passages. Upgrade yourself with the OMTimes Experts program. With OMTimes Experts, you have access to the best intuitive coaches, spiritual teachers, counselors, astrologists, and oracles. Our team was carefully selected so you can trust. Find out more at experts.omtimes.com.
You took the first step and quit smoking, but even former smokers may still be at risk for lung cancer. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know about a new low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early. It takes only 60 seconds and could save your life. You took the first step, now take the next. Visit SaveByTheScan.org for a simple quiz to see if you're eligible and talk to your doctor about screening. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
When it comes to parenting, there are no perfect answers. But that's okay, because you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Teens in foster care will love you just the same.
For more information on adoption, visit adoptuskids.org. A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Steven.
Who said that?
Me, down here.
Ugh, what are you, a yellow booger?
I'm a banana slug, Steven.
What are you doing in my room?
I'm your sense of adventure. It's been a long time since we've had an adventure in the forest.
Mom took me to the forest last year.
I'm a slug, Steven. It took me a long time to get here.
You're right. I should get out.
Yeah, the forest is not that far away.
Hey, Mom!
Come to the forest where the more adventurous you lives. Check out discovertheforest.org for cool places nearby. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Melissa from Michigan. I work an extra part-time job serving lunch at my child's school, but I still can't afford to put food on our table.
Daniel from California. Choosing whether to pay the rent or pay to fix the car to get to work doesn't leave us with much at all. Now we can't even pay for meals.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this evening, Dena Merriam. We're talking about her book, My Journey Through Time, a spiritual memoir of life, death, and rebirth. Merriam, as someone who strives and works for peace and understanding, how do you view our world as it is today? We talked a little bit about it. Talk a little bit more.
Well, it seems that every step you take forward, you take a step, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I think we were all have felt encouraged by the spiritual awakening that's taking place now. That's been going on for the last few decades, with many more people meditating and many more people experiencing multiple traditions. So they're not needing to identify with one or the other. So I think there are a lot of positive things at the spiritual level. It hasn't manifested yet in any of our external institutions. We see that things are not working politically. We think economically, there's greater disparity than there's been in ages. So something's greatly imbalanced. And then you look at the ecosystems that are so imbalanced. And of course, everything is connected. In my work with the UN, I used to get very frustrated that they don't, at that time, I've been working there with them for 20 years, didn't see that everything is connected. You can't talk about the imbalance in the ecosystems without talking about the imbalance in the economy. social imbalances, gender imbalance. It's all imbalance. So what is it about the human psyche that can't bring things back into harmony? So I think we're at an evolutionary moment, and the only thing that can really help us through this is an awakening of consciousness, which is what, and I've been doing a lot of interviews for the book, and I realized that actually all over the country there are these radio shows. So people have a thirst and eagerness for this, for this awakening, possibility. I think people see that things have to change. But there's resistance to change. There's always resistance. There are some people who just want to go back in time, keep things the way they are. And that's just not going to happen. Evolution does not go backwards. It's a maybe a natural feeling for those who are fearful of the unknown. But we have to keep moving forward. And I think that the best sign of hope is what's happening at the spiritual level.
How do we bring the feminine divine back into the consciousness of mainstream humanity?
When I first started talking about this 20 years ago, it fell on deaf ears. When I talked about the divine feminine, people would look at me like, what are you talking about? And I did a big conference in 2008 on the divine feminine, and many of the people from the I had a Catholic nun who I was very close to. She said, Dena, I theologically have a problem with this. I said, deal with it as best you can. Well, she gave a brilliant presentation on the divine feminine and then just started teaching that wherever she went. And now, of course, it's mainstream. So it's easy to talk about. The Parliament of World Religions, which is meeting in November in Toronto, has got a whole session on a whole day, I think, on the divine feminine. So I've seen in 20 years that interfaith has really evolved. First they used the word tolerance, and then respect, and now mutual respect. I mean, there's been a real evolution, and so many people who've been working in this field for 20 years have come to a place of really just embracing the other cultures. Of course, we're not everybody. We're just a particular part of the population who do this work. But I think the divine feminine is much more integrated now, at least in the interfaith spiritual movement. Yeah. Maybe not in the religions per se.
My wonderful spiritual teacher back in the 90s used to say that we cannot stop at tolerance. We have to go all the way to loving and respecting one another, and through that, we'll understand each other.
Yeah, no, I never liked the word tolerance. To me, that was just, why bother? We're just going to tolerate each other? I mean, we're not going to get far.
Absolutely, absolutely. Why is your book, My Journey Through Time, so timely right now?
I think death is kind of the last frontier, and people are looking at it in new ways. There have been a number of books out of people having death experiences and coming back. And there are these deaf cafes where people get together on the internet and talk about death. So I think that people are kind of trying to understand, maybe it's not the end. The way I see it, when you have memories of that other world, you could say that this is a death, and that's the real world. So what is real? So I think one of the reasons the book is timely is because of looking at death in a different way. I also think, just like karma has entered the mainstream, people talk about, I've found people in the workplace are talking about karma. Reincarnation is also much more accepted today. I read Pew Forum did a study that said 25% of American Christians accept reincarnation. I'm sure it's more than that. So there's been a huge change in the way people look at this. 40 years ago, it was still regarded as an occult or, Hindu thing, but no longer.
And how can people who have a fear of death, how can they overcome that fear?
I think by just affirming that that they're an eternal being, that they've lived before, and that they will live again. And just that affirmation that, and, if people don't meditate, there's always the opportunity to just be reflective about your life. And if you're reflective about your life, you can see clues and inclinations that have to have come from somewhere. And then if you really listen and quiet yourself, the soul intuitively knows that death is just a doorway to something else. So I think making peace with that, and then knowing that there are loved ones throughout the universe, and all the lives that we've had. How many loved ones have we had? How many children and fathers and mothers and sisters and brothers and husbands and wives and beloveds?
Absolutely. Since sharing your story, have other people come forward and shared their experiences with you?
Yes, many people have, yeah.
Can you give us an example of one or two?
Well, I was doing, many people, but I was doing a radio show the other day, and a woman called in, and she was from the Midwest somewhere, and she said to me that her grandson, I think he was 5 or 6, maybe 5, one day just came out and said, "I remember Jesus' death. I was there." And she said he said it with such clarity that I had to believe him. And then she said to me, "Is it possible?" I said, "Well, of course it's possible," And he told her many things after that. That's why I say that what's surprising to me is that I think most people have had an experience, either themselves or somebody that they know. But the other thing that was very touching to me, which is one of the reasons I published the book, was I gave the manuscript to a colleague, a writer friend of mine, who was an agnostic. And she had just been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And when she read the book, she was so moved. It helped her so much. She subsequently died. But it helped her so much at the end of her life that she encouraged me to publish it. And I've had many friends share it with people who've been diagnosed with cancer, who lost a loved one. And a number of them have written to me saying how much it helped them. So I think this even if you don't remember your past, I think just feeling more peaceful about this transition that we call death. To me, that's really my hope for the book.
What a lovely gift. That is such a lovely gift. And they say there are no accidents or coincidences. And obviously you're sharing that book with that friend of yours was such a gift and such a wonderful thing. I feel a bond with you as we both have feet in the business world and in the spiritual world. Have you been able to combine these, or do you keep them separate?
I keep them separate, I should say. There are people at work who are interested, and some few of them have read the book. But it's a family business. My brother runs a business. I told my brother about the book, but he never inquired. I never pressed it on him. They know that I have a whole spiritual work. They know about my meditation. They know I travel around the world organizing peace conferences. I only share with people who inquire.
And what are the 3 main teachings that you've gained from your past life experiences?
I would say the main one is the love that has remained with me from guides, the love of guides from the past, my teachers from the past, the connection that I still feel with them, the gratitude that I feel toward them. Remembering those people has been such a blessing. They're with me all the time. That's been one thing. And I think another thing is seeing death differently, and also my sense of identity. I don't see this one life as my full identity. I see it just as a part of who I am. And so I know that I've been many things. And I'll tell you just a quick story. I was doing a racial healing dialogue in Charleston, and one of the leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement down there invited us to an annual ceremony that they do every year on the ocean for the slaves who died on the ship coming over. And he invited us, and the group was half white and half black. And few of us decided to go. I decided to go. I remembered my life in Africa, and in that life, my son and my sister had been taken away as slaves, and my sister died on the ship, and they tossed her over. And I remembered that. And so when we did the healing, when we did the ceremony, they were throwing flowers into the ocean in memory of the Africans who died in the ocean. And suddenly I saw my sister there. And I was able to do a closing ceremony, something I'd never been able to complete. It was such a sense of completion for me. And I remember afterwards, one of the other white participants said to me, that was a private thing. We should not have been there. And I looked at him and I said, that was very meaningful to me. I needed to be there. He didn't understand exactly what I was talking about. But just think, if we recognized all of where we've been, we wouldn't see ourselves as any different from other people.
Absolutely. My Journey Through Time, a spiritual memoir of life, death, and rebirth. Dena Merriam, please tell our listeners one more time where they can get your book and find out about your work.
And get the book on Amazon, and you can go to my website, which is GPIW, that's for the Global Peace Initiative of Women, gpiw.org, and I'm on Facebook, and I think Twitter as well. Either Dena Merriam or GPIW.
Dena, thank you so much for joining us tonight. This truly was a gift. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
And thank you all for joining us on Destination Unlimited. I'm Victor the Voice Furman. Have a wonderful week.